Good morning, you're watching DD India and I'm Preeti presenting News on the Hour, a show which we get for you every morning to make sure that you keep yourself abreast with everything that's making it to the headlines. We will begin with details on Prime Minister's US visit. He will be embarking today in a short while from now for the US, and he will be having engagements there. We'll keep you updated on that. Also, we'll get you other international updates, also national headlines, updates from the world of business, sports, enough to keep you engaged for the next 1 hour. First, the top stories. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to embark on the all-important US visit today, coinciding with the 76th session of the UN General Debate. This is Prime Minister Modi's first foreign visit out of Asia after the COVID pandemic. On the schedule are a string of high-level meetings, including the bilateral with US President Biden, the first in-person summit of the Quad grouping, and also Prime Minister Modi's address to the UN General Assembly. Prime Minister Modi speaks to French President Emmanuel Macron over telephone. The leaders discuss situation in Afghanistan, bilateral collaboration in the Indo-Pacific. Also, Prime Minister Modi underlines the value of strategic partnership with France, including in the UN Security Council. Macron underlines to further build on their commitment to Indo-Pacific cooperation. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar partakes in multiple bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the UNGA session. Dr. S. Jaishankar meets his counterparts from France, Iran, Egypt, Australia and Indonesia. The UNGA General Debate kicks off in New York. Secretary General Antonio Guterres calls vaccine inequality between the developed and the developing world an obscenity, stresses on the need for cooperation to address the surge in misinformation that is polarizing people. US President Joe Biden expresses intention to double the climate change aid to developing nations, says end of Afghan conflict is an opening up of a new era of relentless diplomacy. As DD India reports from Ground Zero, get all the news, views and updates all through the day and night during Prime Minister Modi's visit to the United States. Join our expert panel for all live and exclusive details of the entire event. India's 2 more beaches accorded the coveted Blue Flag certification. Foundation for Environment Education in Denmark awarded the certification to Kovalam Beach in Tamil Nadu and Eden Beach in Puducherry. Also, total number of such beaches in the country stands at 10 now. Alright, those are the top stories. Let's get you first news from Prime Minister's US visit. The stage is all set for Prime Minister Narendra Modi's 7th visit to the United States, which is notably his first after the Biden-Harris administration took to office. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will leave for the US today. During the visit, Prime Minister will meet US President Joe Biden in Washington and also address the UNGA in New York. Prime Minister Modi and President Biden have met virtually thrice for the Quad Virtual Summit, Climate Leaders Summit and the G7 Summit. But on 24th September, President Biden will host Prime Minister Modi at the White House for their first in-person meeting. The agenda for the bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Biden is a substantive one. Both the leaders are expected to review the entire gamut of ties, including counter-terrorism cooperation, situation in Afghanistan and Indo-Pacific region, defense cooperation and also trade and investment relationship, and also chart the future course of the partnership. All eyes will be on that bilateral meeting, besides on how the 4 Quad leaders will synergize their energies for common good in the Indo-Pacific and also meet the challenges in the region. when they meet for their first in-person summit on the same day in Washington, D.C. This and more in detail in the report ahead.
The first transatlantic visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi after the COVID pandemic. Prime Minister Narendra Modi heads to the United States of America on a 4-day visit. He will touch down in Washington, D.C. on the first leg of his visit, and the second leg will see him in New York to attend the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. From the first bilateral meeting with President Joe Biden and leaders of the Quad countries to participation in the Quad Summit and his address to the UNGA. It's a high-power, action-packed agenda. Prime Minister will also attend the COVID-19 summit hosted by US President Joe Biden. The summit is aimed at rallying the world to work towards ending this pandemic as rapidly as possible and building more resilient systems to handle any future pandemics.
The Prime Minister will participate in the COVID-19 global summit as well, hosted by President Biden. There is another conference before the actual meeting.
On September 23, Prime Minister will hold bilateral meetings with Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's meeting with Prime Minister Scott Morrison gains significance as it comes after the AUKUS deal. Prime Minister Modi and Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga will review the progress made in the already close relationship. The Prime Minister will also hold a meeting with select CEOs of American companies. US-India bilateral trade in goods and services reached $149 billion in 2019. On September 24, Prime Minister will hold a bilateral meeting with US President Joe Biden at the White House in Washington, D.C. This would be Prime Minister's first in-person meeting with Joe Biden after he became US President in January 2021.
The leaders have been in regular contact in recent months. The Prime Minister has also participated in 3 major conferences and summits with President Biden as a participant. These were the Quad Leaders Summit, which was virtually held in March this year. This was also the Climate Leaders Summit, which President Biden has hosted. Both these summits were hosted by President Biden. But they also participated in the G7 summit. The Prime Minister attended virtually in Cornwall in the UK.
Previously, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had met Joe Biden when he had visited India in 2014 as the Vice President, and in 2016 when he chaired the joint session of the US Congress. The leaders are expected to discuss counterterrorism and the security situation following recent developments in Afghanistan.
The bilateral meetings would also feature current regional security situation following recent developments in Afghanistan, our stakes as a neighbor and a long-standing and preferred development partner of the people of Afghanistan. In this context, we would undoubtedly discuss the need to stem radicalism, extremism, cross-border terrorism, and the dismantling of global terrorist networks.
Prime Minister will also meet Vice President Kamala Harris. Again, this will be the first in-person meeting between the two leaders. The next highlight of the 24th is the Quad Summit, the first in-person meeting of the 4 big powers.
We elevated the Quad partnership among Australia, India, Japan, and the United States to take on challenges ranging from health security to climate to emerging technologies. We're engaging with regional institutions from ASEAN to the African Union to the Organization of American States to focus on people's urgent needs for better health and better economic outcomes.
The leaders will review progress made since the first virtual summit on the 12th of March 2021.
This is the first time that there would be an in-person Quad Summit. This would be on the 24th of September, held at the White House. Prime Minister will join Prime Minister Morrison, Prime Minister Suga, and President Biden for the summit. 4 leaders will share views and perspectives on the regional situation and the emerging challenges, including in South Asia and the Indo-Pacific region, on how to work together to contain COVID-19, evolve a common approach to emerging technologies, and a means of addressing climate change. The leaders will take stock of progress made since the March summit, especially in the COVID-19 vaccine partnership, They will identify new areas of cooperation that will reinforce the positive and constructive agenda of the Quad, including contemporary areas that will benefit the Indo-Pacific region as a whole.
On 25th September, Prime Minister will address the general debate, the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. The theme for this year's general debate is Building Resilience Through Hope to Recover from COVID-19, Rebuild Sustainability, Respond to the Needs of the Planet, Respect the Rights of People, and Revitalize the United Nations.
On the 25th of September, the Prime Minister will be the first head of state or government to address the United Nations General Assembly at its 76th session. While addressing the UN General Assembly, the Prime Minister will dwell on the important issues, including the regional situation, cross-border terrorism, global efforts to combat COVID-19 and climate change, and the need to reform multilateral institutions.
India has been a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council for 8 terms and is bidding for a permanent seat. As the nation celebrates 75 years of independence, Prime Minister Narendra Modi may once again push this agenda. India had held the presidency of the United Nations Security Council for the month of August.
This is Gautam Roy in Washington, D.C. for DD India.
India and the US relationship is heading towards positive and upward direction. On the first in-person Quad summit taking place this time despite COVID pandemic, discussions would focus on vaccines, healthcare and emerging technologies besides many other regional issues. Our correspondent Gautam Roy is tracking the build-up to the Quad summit closely. Gautam talked to the Indian ambassador to the US, Taranjeet Singh Sandhu. Let's listen in.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be in Washington, D.C. very soon, and he'll be holding a key bilateral with U.S. President Joe Biden, the first that they will have with Joe Biden as President of the United States. And then there is the all-important in-person Quad summit as well, which the world is looking to tackle challenges that keep arising with every change that the world encounters. And we have some answers that we can seek from India's ambassador to the U.S., Taranjeet Singh Sandhu, who's with us. Very good day to you, sir. What can you tell us in terms of the summit itself? We've had a very, very fruitful relationship for, well, going back more than 2 decades. That's when things turned around really between India and the US. But where is it headed now?
So, if you, as you rightly said, that the last 2 decades, the relationship between the United States and India has been heading in positive and upward direction. And in this, in fact, it's very interesting to know that the relationship between Prime Minister Modi and President Biden also goes back to 2014 when Prime Minister Modi visited the United States for the first time. And then Vice President Biden hosted a lunch in his honor. Next time in 2016, when Prime Minister Modi visited in June, there was a historic congressional session which he addressed, and Vice President Biden presided over that ceremony. So the relationship is old, but as you have correctly pointed out, it is moving ahead. In fact, in the first 100 days of Biden administration, we have had intensive interactions between our 2 democratic polities. This is despite all the pressures of COVID and the limitations that have been placed by it. So at least 3 times both the leaders spoke to each other. There were 2 summits, one on climate and one the first Quad virtual summit, in which Prime Minister Modi had a prominent place, and he addressed and expressed his presence there. Then subsequently, as far as the bilateral relationship is concerned, we have also had high-level exchanges between both the sides. Senior cabinet members of the US administration have visited India, and so have the Indian side come in. As I have mentioned to you, because of the COVID, there has been a certain limitation, but things are moving ahead, and this is the first in-person Quad summit which is taking place. President Biden during the virtual summit had mentioned that the first summit in person will be held before end of the year, and as you can see that we are still in September, and the first summit is being held here despite the COVID.
Certainly, and that is something that everyone is looking forward to, because the virtual summit in itself in March had laid out a path for the Quad which was not really, it wasn't clear that that's what will emerge from that particular summit. There were 3 working groups that were formed on vaccines, on climate change and critical technologies. Will we see more of that, work being done, taking it further, or will there be more dimensions that will be added in this particular summit?
So I must point out to you here that the 3 working groups have been continuously working. So despite it not being visible to everyone, the intensive interactions between the 4 countries has been taking place, and there is a lot of movement ahead on the vaccines front. Soon enough the production of vaccines is beginning in India, and these will be for export purposes, as was indicated in that is the next year. Also on emerging technologies as well as on climate change. You are aware that climate change is an important agenda both for Prime Minister Modi and President Biden. And India has the largest renewable program, and in that there is a lot of scope for climate finance and climate technology. And United States is looking at India as the most important destination for investment.
Sounds great, sir. Thank you so much for speaking to DD India. So there you have it. That's what the Quad is building up upon. A lot of capabilities that are inherent in India, and that will be coming to the fore in the course of the next couple of days. This is Gautam Roy with camera person Smriti Ranjan for DD India in Washington, D.C.
All right, India has been maintaining that Quad has a positive agenda, and the in-person Quad summit would be an opportunity to review progress and chart out the course on affordable and equitable access to COVID vaccines, critical and emerging technologies, climate change, and also further bolstering cooperation in the Indo-Pacific and other regions.
Flag bearer of freedom, democracy, peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific, the Quad is all set for its first in-person leadership summit. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be meeting with his 3 Quad counterparts, US President Joe Biden, Japanese Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide and Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison in the White House on Friday, the 24th of September. It's Prime Minister Modi's second foreign visit since the coronavirus pandemic spread across the world last year. The first was to Bangladesh for 3 epical events, including its Golden Jubilee, but this is the first transcontinental visit.
Prime Minister's visit to the US. As mentioned therein, he will participate in the first in-person Quad Leaders Summit in Washington on September 24th. On September 25th, he will address the UN General Debate of the UN General Assembly at its 76th session. While Prime Minister is in Washington, he will also have a bilateral meeting with President Biden. We also look forward to bilateral meetings with other Quad leaders.
This may be the first in-person Quad summit, but the 4 leaders had met virtually just over 6 months ago in the first virtual leaders summit. The ramped up frequency making it evident that the platform is being revved up on the engagement and action front. The pandemic, its impact and the changing geopolitical situation from Afghanistan in the west to North Korea in the east, apart from the moves made by China throughout the Indo-Pacific and beyond, has widened the Quad's agenda and action points. Indicated as much by External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar when he briefed media after the recent 2+2 talks with Australia in New Delhi.
As members of the Quad, we recognize the importance of plurilateralism in a multipolar and rebalanced world. We appreciate the value of our trilaterals with Japan, France and Indonesia and will hold these dialogues soon. The importance of ongoing cooperation in multilateral arena for preserving the rules-based international order was also emphasized. Our cooperation in the Commonwealth is important to that organization's performance.
There are clear indications on the areas the Quad would like to move its cooperation and coordination forward. According to a White House statement, on the in-person summit, the leaders will focus on advancing practical cooperation in areas like combating COVID-19, addressing the climate crisis, partnering on emerging technologies and cyberspace, and promoting a free and open Indo-Pacific. These agenda themes clearly show that the Quad is rapidly moving beyond a grouping of nations only focused on security-related issues in the Indo-Pacific. But all agenda items do stem from the common goal of promoting freedom, democracy, peace and prosperity for all. Bureau Report, DD India.
And let's now get some updates from ground situation in Washington, D.C. ahead of the much-awaited bilateral summits and also the first in-person Quad summit. Our correspondent Arun Sharma sends us this report.
Flag bearer of freedom, democracy, peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific, the Quad is all set for its first in-person leadership summit. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be meeting with his three Quad counterparts, US President Joe Biden, Japanese Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide and Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison in the White House on Friday, the 24th of September. It's Prime Minister Modi's second foreign visit since the coronavirus pandemic spread across the world last year. The first was to Bangladesh for three epical events, including its Golden Jubilee, but this is the first transcontinental visit.
Leaders of world's largest democracy and world's oldest democracy will be under one roof to discuss various regional, global and bilateral issues. This will be the first in-person meeting of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joe Biden. Well, the corporate sector is keenly observing this visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi as to how India and US can come forward and can create a better trade and investment regime, because all eyes will be on the Prime Minister Narendra Modi and of course US President Joe Biden as to how can a better investment regime or the trade regime can be created so that India's Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India initiative can also get a major push. On the other side, the Indian diaspora will also be observing this visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to US very closely, because we know this fact that the Indian diaspora is looking for a very liberalized visa regime, and in this post-COVID or post-pandemic time, how can travel restrictions can be eased out. So that is what be the focus area of the Indian diaspora, as well as to what is the outcome of the visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's to US as well. So on the other side, the White House has released a press statement and clearly mentioned this point that in this multifaceted relationship, various other topics will be discussed, but yes, countering terrorism, Afghanistan crisis, security and prosperity in Indo-Pacific are some of the key issues that are likely to dominate on the agenda. So all in all, this visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi will play an important role in taking the trade and commerce to a new height, and of course the relationship between India and US will also prosper going forward. With camera person Smriti Ranjan, Arun Sharma, Doordarshan News, Washington DC.
And also Prime Minister Narendra Modi and French President Emmanuel Macron on Tuesday vowed to act jointly in the Indo-Pacific region. Prime Minister Modi has underlined the value of strategic partnership with France, including in the UN Security Council. The French presidency said amidst fallout with Australia and the US due to the AUKUS deal. During a telephonic conversation, Macron assured Prime Minister Modi of continued commitment towards strengthening of India's strategic autonomy, including its industry and technology base, as part of a close relationship based on trust and mutual respect. The two leaders also discussed the situation in Afghanistan and agreed to coordinate ahead of multilateral summits such as G20 and COP26. President Emmanuel Macron warmly welcomed India's decision to resume vaccine exports to COVAX. Also in a warm gesture, the French president greeted Prime Minister Modi with Namaste, Priya Saathi, Priya Mitra. He thanked Prime Minister Modi for reaffirming the importance of our strategic partnership. India and France are strongly committed to making the Indo-Pacific an area of cooperation and shared values. Macron said that the two nations will continue to build on this. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar partakes in multiple bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the UNGA session. Dr. S. Jaishankar began the day by meeting India's strategic partner France. He met France's Foreign Affairs Minister, and both the leaders held comprehensive discussions on Afghanistan, Indo-Pacific and also other contemporary issues. India and France are solid partners in the UN Security Council. Dr. S. Jaishankar met his counterpart from Iran. Both the leaders held discussions on strengthening the bilateral cooperation. Their meeting has reaffirmed the convergence of regional issues. External Affairs Minister also met Foreign Minister of Egypt. Both the leaders agreed on taking forward their bilateral cooperation. They also exchanged views on the Gerd issue and also Afghanistan. External Affairs Minister also met with his counterpart from Australia. Australia is also Quad partner of India, and both the leaders held strategic conversations. They also carried forward their discussions from the last meeting. Both apprised of the recent developments in the Indo-Pacific. Dr. S. Jaishankar also held meeting with a key ASEAN partner, Indonesia. Both the leaders discussed regional developments and also shared interests and common perspectives that drive strong cooperation. Besides, Dr. S. Jaishankar also met his counterparts from Vietnam, Lithuania, Belgium, Cyprus, Italy, Republic of Korea, Dominican Republic and also Hungary. In the second leg of his US visit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be in New York on 25th of September to address the general debate of the high-level segment of the 76th session of the UNGA. Also, the theme for this year's general debate is building resilience through hope to recover from COVID-19, rebuild sustainably, also respond to the needs of the planet, respect the rights of people, and revitalize the United Nations. We must note here that peacekeeping is an important function of the United Nations, and in India's engagement with the United Nations, peacekeeping has been a key pillar. India has been involved with peacekeeping since the inception of the UN. The next report tells you all about the history of Indian peacekeeping. Take a look.
India has had a long and distinguished history of service in US peacekeeping. It has contributed more personnel than any other country. To date, more than 253,000 Indians have served in 49 of the 71 UN peacekeeping missions established around the world since 1948. Currently, there are 5,500 troops and police from India who have been deployed to UN peacekeeping missions, the fifth highest among troop contributing countries. Now, India's participation in the UN peacekeeping missions dates back to the 50s. It took part in the UN operation in Korea in the 1950s. India's mediatory role in resolving the stalemate over prisoners of war in Korea led to the signing of the armistice ending the Korean War. India chaired the 5-member Neutral Nations Repatriation Commission, while the Indian Custodian Force supervised the process of interviews and repatriation that followed. The UN entrusted Indian armed forces with subsequent peace missions in West Asia, Cyprus and the Congo. India also served as the chair of the 3 international commissions for supervision and control for Vietnam, Cambodia and Laos, established by the 54 Geneva Accords on Indochina. India has a long tradition of sending women on UN peacekeeping missions as well. In 2007, India became the first country to deploy an all-woman contingent to a UN peacekeeping mission. The formed police unit in Liberia provided 24-hour guard duty and conducted night patrols in the capital Monrovia and helped to build the capacity of the Liberian police. Hailed as role models, these women officers not only played a vital role in restoring security in the West African nation, but also contributed to an increase in the number of women in the Liberian security sector. In addition to their security role, the members of the female Indian formed police unit also distinguished themselves through humanitarian service, including organizing medical camps for Liberians, many of whom have limited access to healthcare services. Indian veterinarians serving with the UN mission in South Sudan stepped up to help cattle herders who were losing much of their stock to malnutrition and disease in the war-torn nation. The Indian contingent in South Sudan has gone the extra mile by giving vocational training and life-saving medical assistance, as well as carrying out significant road repair work. Indian contingent in the Upper Nile region received UN Medals of Honor for their dedication and service in peacekeeping. Now, India's long-standing service has not come without cost. 173 Indian peacekeepers have paid the ultimate price while serving with the UN. India has lost more peacekeepers than any other member state.
The contribution you have made to inspiring Liberian women, to impart in them the spirit of professionalism, to encourage them to join those entities, those operations that protect the nation. For that we'll always be grateful.
And up next, we're heading for a short break. Stay with us. We'll be back in a short while.
Our national mission on cleanliness and sanitation Swachh Bharat Abhiyan has a special focus on plastic waste management. Environmental degradation hurts the poor and vulnerable the most. It is the duty of each one of us to ensure that the quest for material prosperity does not compromise our environment. Let us all join together to beat plastic pollution and make this planet a better place to live. The choice that we make today will define our collective future. The choice may not be easy, but through awareness, technology, and genuine global partnership, I'm sure we can make the right choices.
Welcome back after the break. The UNGA general debate has kicked off in New York. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Tuesday called vaccine inequality between the developed and the developing world an obscenity while giving the world an F grade in ethics. He said that the majority of the wealthier world has been immunized, but over 90% of people of the African continent are still waiting for a jab. The UN Secretary General pushed for a global plan to vaccinate at least 70% of the world by half of next year.
The majority of the wealthier world vaccinated, over 90% of Africans still waiting for the first dose. This is a moral indictment of the state of our world. It is an obscenity. We passed the science test, but we are getting an F in ethics.
US President Joe Biden, in his maiden address at the UN General Assembly yesterday, called on UN member states to work together to confront common challenges such as climate change and COVID-19. Biden is sure to work with Congress to double the funds by 2024 for helping developing nations deal with climate change.
In April, I announced the United States will double our public international financing to help developing nations tackle the climate crisis. And today, I'm proud to announce that we'll work with the Congress to double that number again, including for adaptation efforts. This will make the United States a leader in public climate finance, and with our added support, together with increased private capital and from other donors, we'll be able to meet the goal of mobilizing $100 billion to support climate action in developing nations.
Defending the chaotic U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, Biden said that he vowed to defend vital U.S. national interests, but also said that the mission must be clear and achievable. He added that America is opening a new era of relentless diplomacy following the end of war in Afghanistan.
We've ended 20 years of conflict in Afghanistan. And as we close this period of relentless war, we're opening a new era of relentless diplomacy, of using the power of our development aid to invest in new ways of lifting people up around the world. We all must advocate for women, the rights of women and girls to use their full talents, to contribute economically, politically, and socially, and pursue their dreams free of violence and intimidation. From Central America to the Middle East to Africa to Afghanistan.
Without naming China, Biden said that America is not seeking a new Cold War or a world divided into rigid blocs. He added that the U.S. was opening a chapter on diplomacy, development, and renewing democracy. Colombian president has also called on international community on Tuesday to ensure an equitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines in order to curb the creation of new and more fearsome variants of the virus. Addressing the UNGA, he urged the international community to strengthen multilateralism with regard to health and advance in vaccine distribution equity, saying that it is their moral duty. He also said that while some countries have acquired enough doses for 6 or 7 times their population and have announced third booster doses, others have not been able to administer any single shot. The South American country is aiming to vaccinate at least 70% of its 50 million inhabitants. Production delays at vaccine manufacturers have left some Colombians waiting for doses in the recent weeks. Brazil's health minister has tested positive on Tuesday, just a few hours after accompanying President Bolsonaro to the United Nations General Assembly. However, the rest of the delegation has tested negative for the virus. He will remain in quarantine in the United States. Iran is ramping up its vaccination program amidst fresh infections. Doctors working in the Iranian capital, Tehran, are saying that vaccines are now available to everyone easily in the country. The country has so far administered over 4 crore 33 lakh vaccine doses, which is enough to have vaccinated about 26.2% of its total population. Also, according to Reuters, the rate of infections are also decreasing in Iran, with 17,020 new infections reported on average each day, 43% of the peak, the highest daily average reported on August 17th. In Bangladesh, COVID-19 situation continued to mark improvement, with sample positivity rate declining to 4.69% on Tuesday. Now, this is the lowest level of sample positivity in Bangladesh in more than 6 months. According to health experts of Bangladesh, the COVID situation is improving, but it can be considered under control if the positivity level remains below 5% for 2 consecutive weeks. Also, according to the latest data, 26 people died and 1,562 new cases of COVID in the country were reported over the last 24 hours. The recovery rate in Bangladesh has gone up to 97.34%. Also, Bangladesh is continuing with the COVID vaccination program, with supplies being procured from multiple sources. Bangladesh has received a new allocation of 7.1 million doses of Moderna vaccine from the US under the COVAX allocation in the last quarter of the year. A quick look at COVID updates from across the world. As per the figures, the case tally has crossed 23 crore mark worldwide. Over 23 crore 3 lakh cases of COVID-19 have been recorded, while recoveries stand over 20 crore 70 lakh globally. The virus has also claimed over 47 lakh 22,000 lives all across the world. The United States remains to be the worst hit nation by the pandemic. So far, over 4 crore 32 lakh 30,000 cases have been reported across the country, and over 6 lakh 96,000 people have lost their lives. The number of fatalities in the US has surpassed the death toll of 1918 Spanish flu. A strong earthquake of magnitude 6 struck the southeastern Australian town of Mansfield in the state of Victoria on Wednesday, causing significant damage to buildings and also other infrastructure. The epicenter of the earthquake was recorded near the rural town of Mansfield, 200 kilometers northeast of Melbourne, and was at a depth of 10 kilometers. An aftershock of magnitude 4 struck the region later. People in northern parts of the city said on social media that they had lost power, and others say that they were evacuated from the buildings. Meanwhile, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has said that there were no reports of serious injuries from the quake. The quake measured higher than the country's deadliest tremor, that is of 5.6 in Newcastle in 1989, which resulted in 13 deaths. In Canada, the outcome of the election mirrored the results of the 2019 election, with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's Liberals holding power with a minority. In a tweet, Trudeau thanked Canada for casting vote, for putting trust in the Liberal team, for choosing a brighter future. He said that Liberal government is going to finish the fight against COVID and move Canada forward. While Conservative leader Erin O'Toole has vowed to work tirelessly to expand the party's influence, in a speech one day after Canada's federal election, Elections Canada, which administers the federal election, only began to verify and count the roughly 1.2 million mail-in ballots on Tuesday. They expect it to be a two-day process, with final results forecast for today. Trudeau called the snap election last month, hoping to parlay a smooth COVID-19 vaccine rollout among the best in the world into a new mandate to steer the nation's pandemic exit, and also pass his agenda without opposition support. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi has congratulated Canadian counterpart Justin Trudeau for the victory in the elections. In a tweet, the Prime Minister said, and I quote him, "I look forward to working with you to further strengthen India-Canada relations as well as our cooperation on the global and multilateral issues." And India has achieved yet another milestone in its journey towards a clean and green India, led by Prime Minister Modi. Coveted international eco-label Blue Flag has accorded the Blue Flag certification for two new beaches of India this year, that is Kovalam Beach in Tamil Nadu and Eden Beach in Puducherry. India has now 10 Blue Flag beaches. Foundation for Environment Education in Denmark, which accords the globally recognized eco-label Blue Flag certification, has also given brief certification for 8 nominated beaches, which were awarded the Blue Flag certificate last year. Now, these beaches are Shivrajpur in Gujarat, Bhogya in Diu, Kasarkot and Padubidri in Karnataka, Kapad in Kerala, Rishikonda in Andhra Pradesh, Golden in Odisha and Radhanagar in Andaman and Nicobar. Also, Union Environment, Forest and Climate Change Minister Bhupendra Yadav expressed happiness and congratulated everyone. The ministry is further committed to develop and deliver 100 more beaches under its ICZM, or the Integrated Coastal Zone Management Initiative, in the ensuing 5 years of the ministry's vision agenda. And let's get to an update on the fight against COVID-19 back home. With timely tracing, testing and treating, the country has been able to contain the spread of the virus. The recovery rate is currently at 97.77%, which has touched a milestone with the highest record since March 2020. 34,167 recoveries have been recorded in the last 24 hours, taking the total recoveries to 3,27,83,741. India has reported 26,964 new cases in the last 24 hours. Also, the active cases account for less than 1% of the total cases, currently at 0.9%. Now, this is the lowest since March 2020. The country's active caseload stood at 3,01,989, which is the lowest in 186 days. The weekly positivity rate remains less than 3% for the last 89 days and is currently at 2.08%. The daily positivity rate remains below 3% for the last 23 days and is now at 1.69%. More than 55.67 crore samples have been tested for the virus so far across India. Also in a landmark achievement, India's COVID vaccination coverage has crossed 82.65 crore vaccine doses so far under the nationwide vaccination drive. Cumulatively, 82 crore 65 lakh 15,754 beneficiaries have been vaccinated so far, and more than 75 lakh 57,000 vaccine doses were administered on Tuesday. Director General of the World Health Organization has thanked Union Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia for announcing resumption of crucial COVID-19 vaccine shipments to COVAX in October by India. In a tweet, he said that this is an important development in support of reaching the 40% vaccination target in all countries by the end of the year. The Modi government is fulfilling the desire of 6,000 residents of Turtuk and nearby villages in Ladakh to commemorate their liberation from POK in 1971. Our correspondent Nandita Dagar reports.
The village of Turtuk is strategically important as it lies on the line of control and is close to the line of actual control. Turtuk is located on the banks of the river Shyok. These villages form the only region in India populated by the Balti people. Turtuk was under Pakistani control until the war of 1971 when the Indian Army captured the village. The village is one of the gateways to the Siachen Glacier. It was on the night of December 13th in 1971 that the Indian Army had marched into Turtuk in Nubra after defeating the Pakistani army in an operation that lasted 4 days. Back then, these 6 villages were part of Pakistan's northern areas. On the morning of December 14th, Major Chewang Rinchen of Ladakh Scouts of the Indian Army approached the men folk in Turtuk village who were hiding in their homes as the battle between the two armies was raging. He allayed their fears and the women and children hiding in a nearby Nala returned to their homes. The memory of Major Rinchen endures to this day. He had spoken in Chase Ladakhi. The Indian Army will help you in all respects. Bring back your women folk and children, they are like our mothers and sisters. I will be responsible for their safety. The army had then captured other villages in the next 2 days without facing any resistance from the Pakistani army as their soldiers had abandoned their posts. These 6 villages, Chulunkha, Turtuk U, Turtuk Farul, Tyakshi Grod and Takshi Pangtang and Thang are today inhabited by around 6,000 people. In New Delhi, this is Nandita Dagar for DD News.
And the Government of India has decided to appoint Air Marshal V.R. Chaudhary, presently the Vice Chief of Air Staff, as the next Chief of Indian Air Force. He will assume charge after the retirement of Air Chief Marshal Rakesh Kumar Singh Bhadoria on 30th of this month. Air Marshal V.R. Chaudhary was commissioned into the fighter stream of Indian Air Force on 29 December 1982 and has held various command, staff and instructional appointments at various levels, including the present one as Vice Chief of Air Staff. Air Marshal Chaudhary is decorated with Param Vishisht Seva Medal, Ati Vishisht Seva Medal and Vayu Sena Medal. Assam Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sarma has stressed that Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Union Home Minister Amit Shah are committed to ensuring everlasting peace in the Northeast. He informed that at Dimapur yesterday, discussions were held with NSCNIM representatives in presence of Nagaland Chief Minister Neiphiu Rio about the ongoing peace talks with Government of India. Himanta Biswa Sarma also said that all sides are keen that the ongoing peace talks fructify into concrete results soon. The Assam Chief Minister also discussed political scenario in Nagaland with his Naga counterpart, as well as the upcoming Nagaland Assembly elections and Northeast Democratic Alliance role in it. And every day we bring you a special story on freedom struggle, and in today's edition of Saga of Freedom Struggle, we will talk about Mahatma Gandhi's epoch-making decision to only wear simple dhoti and a shawl for the rest of his life. Along with this, we also remember the great educationist Karmavir Bhaurao Patil. Take a look.
"100 years ago, On this day in 1921, Mahatma Gandhi took the epoch-making decision to only wear a simple dhoti and shawl for the rest of his life, a vow that became part of history as well as Mahatma's own identity.
Gandhiji became one with the poor through his attire, and in the infamous words of imperialist British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, became the half-naked fakir who defeated the might of the British Empire. Today we also remember the great educationist Karamveer Bhavrao Patil, who was born on this day in 1887 at Kolhapur, Maharashtra. Greatly influenced by the philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi, he was a freedom fighter who understood the critical importance of self-reliant mass education as an integral part of the freedom movement.
He founded the Rayat Education Society and played an important role in educating the so-called backward castes and the low-income people. He was a prominent member of Satya Shodhak Samaj, founded by Mahatma Jyoti Rao Phule, and used to perform Satya Shodhaki Jalsas in the villages of Maharashtra and awaken the people to the dire consequences of the social evils of the time.
During his lifetime, Bhavrao established 108 secondary schools, 578 voluntary schools, 6 training colleges, 3 colleges and 38 boarding schools, with many of them being devoted to girls' education.
During a public meeting in 1921, Bhavrao met Gandhiji at Mumbai and was highly impressed by Gandhiji's appearance in a loincloth and his philosophy of khadi. Following this encounter, Bhavrao decided to adopt the khadi attire and follow Gandhian principles in everyday life.
Bhavrao adopted the motto, education through self-help and earn while you learn, which Gandhiji had enshrined in his Nai Talim system of education.
Bhavrao's sterling achievements is that within himself, he combined the inspiration from two Mahatmas, Gandhi and Phule, and carried forward the common principles of social reform.
All right, from here, let's turn focus to sports now. Star Indian cubist Pankaj Advani on Tuesday grabbed his 24th world title when he triumphed at the IBSF 6 Red Snooker World Cup. Pankaj defeated Pakistan's Babar Masiha in the final. Also, Advani, who won his 11th Asian title last week, started the final with a comfortable 42-13 win in the opening frame. Speaking after winning, Pankaj said that he is very fortunate to win both. He expressed happiness over returning home with 2 gold medals for India. Earlier in the day, Pankaj got the better of Asian snooker finalist Amir Sarkosh of Iran 6-3. All right, that's it in this edition of News on the Hour this morning. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.